Welcome back to Joy TCG, where it's Final Fantasy TCG all the time. So I've got a new plan here. I'm going to show you a deck that I built that I think is fun to play. It also has its own challenges, but it does have a big advantage that I really like. So what we've got here, as you can see, is an Earth-based deck, but it has lots of elements in it. The engine for this deck is going to be the Sophie card. Sophie is if she's dealt damage equal, or if, if she deals damage to a forward due to an ability, double the damage instead. And when you cast a character of cost 5 or more, choose a forward opponent controls, deal it damage equal to Sophie's power. You can only do it once per turn. So the idea is you play 5 costs, which would be anything from Verstale all the way up to Shadow Lord, or you've got Tiro and Shantota that would also activate because it's characters. And so if we can get her on the field and she doesn't die right away, you can really do a lot of good removal with her. Now, that's not your only strength in this deck. So I've also decided to play Graph. Now, Graph is a card that I really like because it's not played very often, and I love playing cards that don't see a lot of play. So the Graph card, he's from Opus 13, and it says at the beginning of the attack phase during each of your turns, all the Earth forwards and category Mobius forwards you control gain 2,000 power until the end of the turn. So if you notice, you've got a lot of Mobius forwards in this. Sophie's Mobius, Graph, Heretical Knight Garland, Wool, other Wool, Neo Exdeath, and Shadow Lord. So all of those cards would gain a 2k bonus during the attack phase, as well as Gabranth because he's Earth. So it's a very good small boost, but this deck is all about boosting your power. So it isn't huge, but what I really like is also his special. His special is discard a Graph and pay 1 Earth. All the forwards you control gain 5,000 power until the end of the turn. Draw a card. Draw 1 card. So what I do with that is it's the same as the Titan ability. All the forwards you control gain 5,000 power until the end of the turn. Except you don't get to draw a card off Titan. But giving all your forwards 5k bonus at a moment's notice is huge, because I've had situations where in this deck where I'm attacking with, let's say, Sophie into someone who has a 9k on the field, and they're like, why would you attack with Sophie? And they block because they're like, well, I'm going to kill Sophie. And then I use Graph Special, or I play Titan and make her a 10, and they lose their forward for nothing, essentially. So it's a great sneaky way, and it's and if they don't block, hey, you just got a point of damage off of a 5k that they probably should have tried to block. You know, they don't know that you have power sitting behind waiting to hit them. So sometimes they are nervous about it, and they're like, I don't want to lose my forward in case he plays something. I'll just let him hit me. So you can get some free damage in that way if they kind of understand the idea of how Earth can get huge. Heretical Knight Garland also is awesome because he comes to the field and he gives someone else 4k and Brave. I usually use that to make Wool a 12 and Brave if I'm not at damage 3 yet, where he already has his Brave ability. Or I will also give that to Sophie. So when Sophie's ability activates, instead of her hitting something for 5 times 2, which is 10, she would hit him for 9 times 2, which would be 18,000. So you're guaranteed to kill anything with that kind of hit. Now you'll also notice that we've got lots of elements here. Normally, I try to stick to mono element, or I do a whole bunch of elements. I don't know why, it's just me being weird. So I've got Ice for Rhinoa and Verstale. I've got Earth for Cecil and Wool. And then I've got this Lone Ranger water card in Yang Rosh. And we'll talk about him in a little bit. But the strategy of this deck is make your guys big. And everything in this deck has a lot of power, even if its base power isn't huge. This Gabranth isn't here to be big, but everything else, and Verstale, these two are kind of wimpy, but they're there for a different effect. Everything else is a big card, or it gets big from some other effect. And if you can keep your guys big and they don't get dulled, you're almost guaranteed to win. if you can keep them on the field and they don't get killed somehow. But if your guys don't get dulled by your opponent, you're in a very big advantage in this deck. So my most effective strategy with this deck so far has been to be lucky and grab Wool first turn and have Neo X-Death in hand. So what I can do is, this Wool is when he comes to the field, you can play a category Mobius forward from your hand onto the field. And this was the whole basis of the deck build, was to get Wool and see how many crazy Mobius cards I can play. I tried to run Yayazamat and the 7 CP Fusoya, but they weren't very effective. They're just too hard to get on the field if you don't play them with Wool's ability. So I toned that down a little bit. I tried to get just the biggest, highest CP Mobius cards I could find. But I found that playing Wool first turn with Neo X-Death was absolutely devastating. The opponent, if they don't have summons in hand to take care of Neo X-Death, he can really devastate the board. And I annihilated my opponent like that. He couldn't figure out any way to get around Neo X-Death first turn. And you've got 2 hitters in, turn 2, and they're both huge. So, and your opponent doesn't want to play high cost cards because they're going to lose them at the end of the turn because of Neo X-Death's ability. So it's a very strong option if they don't have summons to take care of them. Now, I'm also playing this Wool, which is odd because he's the same card name as this. So if this Wool's not on the field, I can choose to play this Wool, which has a really cool effect. He's reduced by 1 for each character of cost 5 or more I control. As you can see, there's a lot of 5 or more characters in this build, including 2 of the different backups. And then the forwards of cost 5 or more, other than Wool, you control gain. This forward cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities, which is huge. That can really protect a lot of things. And when you cast a character of cost 5 or more, draw a card once per turn again. So he's got some really cool effects. I've only tested this deck probably 3 or 4 times, so I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I haven't been able to get him on the field since I've put him in this deck. He was my latest addition. This Cecil has been effective. You can play, when he comes to the field, you can play a character of cost 4 or less from your hand to the field. That's usually how I get out extra backups, or Heretical Knight Garland. That's just always what seems like is in my hand when that happens. But so Cecil is really nice, but the downside of this deck, as you can tell with all the elements, is you got to get color fixing on the field. So your best starting hand is going to be Chaos. If you can get Chaos in your hand first turn, you're at a huge advantage, because now you can color fix and you can play any of your cards and you don't get stuck with 3 different colors in your hand, which can happen, so watch out for that. The other thing is, of course, Tiro and Shantoto for color fixing. Now, they're high CP, so getting them on the field early is difficult, but not impossible. The other cards of note here are Enacross, which she gives all Earth forwards 1k, which is another just make your guys bigger. So that's nice, but not necessary, because everyone's already pretty big. The other thing is this Dark Knight card, which I've never seen played. So once again, cards that don't see play, I like to try to fit them in. The cost required to cast Dark Knight is reduced by 1 for each point of damage you've received. And it doesn't say it cannot be reduced to 0. So, as long as you have 3 damage or more, Dark Knight can be played from hand for free, which is awesome. I mean, who doesn't want a free backup? This Warrior has saved me multiple times. I really like this Warrior card. This Gladiator has not. I don't recommend him, really. He was an add-in because I ran out of good choices that were low cost. But this Warrior, amazing. So put Warrior in the break zone and turn him. Choose 1 forward. It gains 2,000 power until the end of the turn, which that I've used to save my guys. So just that 2k boost can be enough. But then it also says if you've received a point of damage this turn, it gains 10,000 power until the end of the turn instead. So if you've taken a point of damage and they come in again, you can turn and break Warrior and give somebody 10k. And of course, 10k added to anything here is going to be strong enough to destroy the attacking forward. Other things that I really like about this deck is this funny Yang Rosh card. So I only have one of him, but his only purpose, really, is... so he says, when Yang Rosh enters the field, choose one backup other than Yang Rosh you control, return it to its owner's hand. So what you do with this, or what I do with this, is we've got this guy. I play him to the field and I return Shantoto so I can replay Shantoto. That's the only real effect of this card, or I can pull back Dark Knight after I've used his other ability and then play him again for free. He's situational, and that's why I only run one, but if I need another Shantoto because I'm getting behind and they've got a bunch of forward, then I don't have enough to do something, I will play him, pull back Shantoto, and then hopefully survive a turn and play Shantoto next turn, because more than likely I probably don't have the CP to play him right away. The other things I like about this deck is how big things get. Searching. So another thing I want to talk about is what you search for with this deck. That's always been the key for me for different, that kind of separates the great players from the okay players, is they know exactly what to search for. And so I feel like that's an important piece to identify when you talk about deck tech. So in this deck, we've got some searchers. We've got Gabrant. When he enters the field, you can search for one forward of cost 5 or more and add it to your hand. We've also got Tiro. Search for a forward and add it to your hand. And that's it for searching, I believe. Yes. So those two searchers, if I'm searching with Gabrant, I'm almost always going to search for Wool. Almost always. And the reason is he's a 5 or more that I really like, and he can play another Mobius for free. Now, if I know I'm playing against someone who's holding an Amaterasu or something like that, probably not going to search for Wool. I'm probably actually going to search for this Wool if he's not on the field already, so I can get this, because this guy doesn't have an auto ability. It's just field effects. And if I have a way to play, like I have a color fixer on the field, I may grab Verstale if I know I haven't already seen a bunch of 5 or higher cards. I used to have a count on the 5 or higher cards in here. I want to say there's less than half now. It used to be right at 25, but I took some out because they were too hard to play. Look like 19 right now. So Verstale is sometimes useful. I usually hit 2 when I flip for him. I don't usually hit the 3 max, but I usually do get 2. You'll notice there's not a lot of EXs in here. All we've got is the 2 searchers have an EX, and the Big Titan has an EX. I generally don't run a lot of EXs in my deck, not because of by choice, just EX cards don't fit in most of my deck builds for some reason. I don't know. So, the other thing I like to talk about with my decks that I feel like hasn't seen a lot of discussion in these deck techs is advantages and disadvantages. So, this deck's advantage is a huge advantage against damage-based removal decks. So if they're playing like fire damage, or even the Glaciella card, where it's damage based on the number of characters they have on the field, I can make my guys so big that they don't die. And that's really difficult to get around, like a Susano, anything like that. You have a big advantage if you're going against fire decks, and specifically Samurais, because of Shadow Lord. He can destroy standard units and all job Samurais, so that would be pretty devastating. And also the advantage is any decks that attack in when you don't have your forwards dulled. So if my forwards are up and they're not dulled, I'm going to have a huge advantage, because any point I have so many ways to boost my power that they can attack in, I can boost my guys and destroy their attacking forward. And same as I talked about before, I can attack in with a lower power guy and they think they're able to block, and then I'll boost them and kill their forward. Weakness, early aggro. It's the biggest weakness in this deck. If you're going against something like the Shinra build with the Turks, or Dragoons that rush, anything that's real fast, where they have 3 forwards on the field first turn, you're probably going to lose, unless you have Shantoto in hand on the draw. That's the only way to save yourself. Also, weakness, instant breaks. I have no protection against instant breaks at all, except for Heretical Knight Garland and Wool have their own effects to protect themselves. But other than that, it's you're pretty much gonna lose guys to instant break builds, and because they're such high cost, it hurts a lot when you lose them because of that. And the other thing that's hard against this deck is anything that does a dull and freeze. So I have another deck I built that's really built around dulling all your opponent's forwards every turn, and that just destroys this deck with it's no mercy. It's probably the biggest weakness, tell you the truth. If you just get dulled down, you're dead. No chance. So I do still really enjoy this deck, though. It's a really fun build, especially the sneaky attack in or get attacked and boost your guys. So let me know what you think. This is my first deck tech video. I only talk about decks that I built myself, and I don't play meta. I always try to find cards that don't see play. Hello, Graph, Yang Rosh, Dark Knight. Yeah, they don't get out a lot, but I'm going to find a way to fit them in that's going to be fun. All right, and we'll see you next time.